Belated Happy Canada Day, everybody, and Tony here with the review of Christoph Willibald Gluck's Orfeo et Euridice, which was shown last night at the Staatsoper im Schiller Theater. The conductor was Domingo Indoyan, the production was done by Jürgen Flim, the set design was done in cooperation with Geri Partners LLP, the costumes were done by Florence von Gerkan, the choreographer was Gail Skrela, the lights were handled by Olaf Frese, the chorus master was Martin Wright, and the dramaturgy was handled by Roman Rega. Now, this is one of Gluck's most famous operas of all time, right up there with the likes of Iphigenia en Tauride, Iphigenia en Aulide, and Alceste. In fact, this is an opera that calls for three principal players to really play these characters, and it's been performed internationally, not just in Europe, but also in the Americas and also in some Asian countries as well. And this is also very well known for its very famous ballet sequence, the Dance of the Blessed Spirits, and also Orfeo's arias, Chiamo il mio ben così, Che puro ciel, and of course the ever famous Che farò senza Euridice, which has been sung by a lot of famous mezzo-contraltos, dramatic mezzos, and contraltos. In fact, the role of Orfeo is one of Kathleen Ferrier's most famous roles of all time. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the production, the costumes, the singers, the conducting, and chorus. The production started off very well. Everyone seems to be in Victorian style clothing, with the funeral taking place in a pretty dark room with a fireplace. And I felt like the darkness really added to the overall lugubrious nature of this opera, as it starts off with Eurydice's funeral and Orpheus mourning for her death and wanting her back. It just really heightens the whole dark atmosphere. We start off seeing Orfeo being the usual someone who is mourning over the loss of his wife until he wants to go to the underworld to rescue his wife, and then the god of love, Amor, or Cupid, comes to tell him that he has to brave all these trials. And in this production, we see that there are these masked men who put Orfeo and bind him on this board for him to go to the underworld, and for that he pretty much has to be stabbed in order for his spirit to wander to the underworld, where he will face a lot of frightening creatures. So the fact that he has to go through death and torture just to make it there is quite something. We even see that there is an ice wall of a gate for Orfeo to enter. After all that is said and done, we see that he enters the Elysian fields. In this production, it's mainly a very surreal and very weird looking land, complete with colors all over the place. And Eurydice's room is basically that of a seedy hotel room where Orfeo tries to get her. The usual thing happens. He looks at her. She at first dies. He suffers, wants to take his own life. Amor says he's been through so much hell, and he gets his wife back with all of the dancers rejoicing. And then something different happens with this production. Orfeo is still rather alone with his violin case full of ashes, as if to say that when all is said and done, there's no such thing as a happily ever after. One thing worth mentioning is the Dance of the Blessed Spirits, where we see different couples in wedding outfits dancing, doing a ballroom dance, and I thought it was really lovely. And the costumes were absolutely gorgeous as well. What with Amor's tuxedo and bob haircut, Orfeo's gorgeous looking outfit, all the chorus members looking absolutely fine and gorgeous, and of course looking very gorgeous with her dress and her coat. I thought everyone looked very fabulous. So overall, it's quite an interesting approach to the myth, and also quite stylistically surreal, but also rather gorgeous to look at. And the costumes really deserve high praise from me. With that said, let's get on to the singers, starting off with Orfeo, who was sung tonight by the great American countertenor Bejun Mehta. Orfeo is a very iconic role for any dramatic mezzo, mezzo contralto, or dramatic contralto. But before this was dominated by those female voices, this used to be created by a countertenor, or even that of a castrato. In fact, the French version calls for a light lyric tenor to sing the title role. This role has become such an icon to a lot of mezzo-contraltos, the likes of Alice Revaux, Rita Gore, Fedora Barbieri, Eve Stignani, Giulietta Signonato, Margareta Klose, Kerstin Thorborg, and I even have Agnes Baltza's rendition of the title role on CD. So there has been no doubt that this role has been mainly dominated by a lot of mezzo-contraltos, with the occasional countertenors and male altos singing this role. I thought that with Bejun Mehta as Orfeo, he was able to really give the goods in terms of not only his voice, but also his theatricality. His technical work is definitely of the highest order. The fact that he was able to really navigate all of that florid singing combined with some of that powerful singing is definitely a feat that few Orfeos can ever attempt, and he does it very well. It's helped that his voice is very homogeneous. However, I'm not too crazy about his bottom notes because this role also does call for any singer to have very good chest notes. His chest notes were okay, but not something I'd like to write home about. However, with that out of the way, I thought that his overall interpretation, his overall musicality, and his overall will to perform this role and to even embody this role and to even be Orfeo was definitely of the highest order. And then we get to his wife, Euridice, sung by the young Franco-German soprano, Elsa Dreisig. Euridice really does call for a light lyric soprano with excellent coloratura technique. She needs to have the agility of a Zerbinetta, a Lacme, a Gilda, a Rosina, and Norina. It also needs to have the light lyric color of that of a Pamina, a Dina, or a Zdenka. And I thought that with Elsa Dreisig, my word, was she absolutely fabulous. First of all, I love the color of her voice. It's sweet, it's light, it's agile, it's everything she wills it to be. What I seem to notice about Elsa Dreisig is that she is quite young, only 24, 25 years old, and she is singing such an iconic Baroque character role. She did very fabulously. Her stage presence is very elegant and charming. It's youthful, it's scintillating, and it just sparks with life and enthusiasm. She embodied her character very, very wonderfully, and I totally bought her performance, especially when she felt like she was about to be scorned by Orfeo. Then we have the God of Love, Amor, sung tonight by the Russian coloratura soprano, Yulia Novikova. This role is rather soubrette-ish, as in it's basically a light soprano role with some fine coloratura techniques. She needs to have the lightness and the breeziness of a Papagena or a Blondchen and have that fine coloratura singing technique of a Zerbinetta, Fiaccarmilli, or Rosina. And I thought that with Yulia Novikova, she did a very wonderful job. In fact, I first saw the soprano when I was only 15 years old on YouTube singing Der Höhlenrache, Les Oiseaux dans l'Eau Charmille, and Lacme's Bell Song, and I thought she did very fabulously in those, and she even embodied the role of Gilda in the movie version of Rigoletto starring Placido Domingo. And throughout the years, her voice seems to have developed from being all light and chirpy to being a lot fuller, and I thought that was rather great. Her voice, even though it has that lightness and slight chirpiness, has actually grown in size and grown in fullness, and her technical work was of the highest order. Her stage presence as Amor was so well done, and she was able to be cheeky yet insightful, youthful yet mature for his age, and overall gives a very well rounded portrayal of this wonderfully boyish role. So, overall, the singing was, as to be expected, not only of the highest order, but everyone seemed to have gone together and gave such an excellent performance. Special kudos has to go to the gentleman who played Jupiter, Wolfgang Stiebritz, for giving such a very fine portrayal of the silent character of the King of the Gods. And of course, the dancers, Martina Boronni, Vanessa Kokaric, Livia Delgado, Susanna Eder, Angeliki Govi, Sarah Grether, Victoria McConnell, Daniel Drabek, Chris Jäger, Roberto Jr., Oren Latorski, Ronnie Maciel, and Vasilios Koutras for really livening up the production. And the conducting done by Domingo Indoyan was, as to be expected, very nuanced and very fine all throughout. I would have wanted to have a slightly slower tempo for Chiamo e mio ben così and some of the other numbers of the opera, but still, his conducting was very nuanced and very fine all throughout. So overall, I really have to say that I loved everything about this opera production. But more than anything, it's the star-studded singing of Bejun Mehta, Elsa Dreisig, and Julia Novikova that really sold it for me. And also the fine conducting done by Maestro Domingo Indoyan. Well, that's all for now. I might end up reviewing Götterdämmerung also at the Staatsoper Schiller Theater, seeing that there might only be 3 more tickets left. But if it's all full, I might end up reviewing Carmen at the Deutsche Oper, starring Agunda Gulayeva. So, which one will I review? Well, we'll probably have to find out. But until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a great Canada Day.